shall I go? What shall I do?
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
Behave yourselves!
Hello YouTubers out there, this is Jerry Sutterby at the Movies. So today we're talking a little bit about Mollie Burkhart, the actual Osage woman who, from Oklahoma in the 1920s, was the basis for the David Grann book Killers of the Flower Moon, in addition to the film by Martin Scorsese called, as well, Killers of the Flower Moon. And Mollie Burkhart, of course, is played by the terrific actress Lily Gladstone. This is the only film I've seen her in that I know of, and I'm curious to see more. She is really that good in the film. Now, there have been criticisms about Killers of the Flower Moon, of course, having a lot to do with the depiction of Mollie Burkhart. There are many that feel, for example, an actress from the show the Reservation Dogs, that she should have been the focal point of the movie, that it should have been her point of view, or at the very least of the Osage tribe. There are, of course, others who feel that the film should have been made by an Osage native, and that sort of thing. Now, the story itself is one that involves all the principal characters that we see. I mean, this is an actual case. This is real history that happened in Oklahoma. So, even if the film really focused exclusively on Mollie Burkhart or the Osage tribe themselves, if you're going to tell this story, you need to involve all the characters that were part of it. That is to say, the ones who were corrupt, who were greedy, who decided to kill many of the Osage natives, numbers which reach way over 20, 30, 40, some of them even unsolved murders at this point of Osage natives in Oklahoma at that time. So you're still going to involve somehow William Hale. You have to talk about William Hale, who was the cattle rancher in the film played by Robert De Niro, who was very wealthy and had orchestrated a conspiracy against these Osage natives, that is, killing them to have possession of their head rights to the land, because the land was oil rich. And it wasn't something that was discovered right away. This was considered a poor piece of land at first, before oil was found. And it was land that belonged to the Osage natives. And so since they had possession of it, they had possession of the oil, and therefore they had the rights to that land and the money that came from it. And it made them quite wealthy. But the irony is, of course, their restriction to the money. They had white guardians, and who was incompetent, which is part of the process by which they could either have the money or have access to it. They had to still go through a white person to get it. And then you've got Ernest Burkhart, another principal character who, of course, is white, but many of the white men came to this part of Oklahoma, Osage County, to marry these women and get possession of their head rights. And it made them wealthy. So either way, Ernest Burkhart was going to be okay. The question is just how soon could he have his money? And he was married, of course, to Mollie Burkhart. And that is the story. So no matter what, you have to involve those characters, because that's really what the story is. Now, my feeling, though, is that Killers of the Flower Moon, it seems to me, since the original screenplay for the film, based on the book, which was an FBI procedural for the most part, was from the point of view of the FBI, that is, Tom White, as played by Jesse Plemons, originally a role given to Leonardo DiCaprio, who of course plays Ernest Burkhart. It was his story, and during COVID, the shooting, obviously, of the film got delayed, and they rewrote the film from the inside out. So they dealt with the Osage tribe and these particular characters: Ernest, William Hale, Mollie Burkhart, and the Osage natives. It's all these characters, and you're seeing what were the repercussions of these murders, how it affected them. Now, the other criticism, before we get back to how Mollie Burkhart, I think, informs the film in many ways, the other criticism was that the Osage natives are shown as ignorant people, that they are dumb. This is not true at all, and it's solely based on fact, especially through the book. The Osage natives, they trusted William Hale. William Hale had lived there for many, many years prior to these murders taking place. They trusted this man. And deeper irony here, William Hale loved these Osage natives. He loved them so much that something that is not mentioned in the film, but in the book, that after he served an almost 20-year sentence, which was trimmed from what would have been a life sentence, which was what should have been really for this man, he said, "I can't wait to get back to Osage County because I love my people." So there's a lot here that is troubling, but the people themselves, they trusted him. See, there's a key scene in the movie where Mollie Burkhart is with her sisters. She had two sisters who were, of course, married to white men. And it's important to mention that they were white because that's just how that's what was going on in this part of the country. And she's there and she sees Ernest Burkhart, and he has come into town. He had just served in World War I, and he's come to town. William Hale is his uncle. So Ernest was going to be, I guess, technically working for his uncle. His uncle is already wealthy. And that is the dialogue they have, the exchange. And Mollie's reminded, hey, Ernest Burkhart, he already has money through his uncle. He definitely loves you, in other words. They're trying to say, we know that they're not in love with us really, but Mollie believed this man was really in love with her. Which, by all accounts, Ernest might have been. He was a simpleton. He was not very bright, but he just did what he was told. And that was William Hale who was pulling the strings. So these criticisms about the film not following the wrong person, and this is not really true at all, I think, but for example, Anthony Lane, film critic for The New Yorker, wrote that it is Ernest Burkhart whose fortunes we are invited to follow. Huh? This dumb dolt with bran for brains? Why should he take center stage? Well, he doesn't exactly take center stage, really. The film is very interesting because it shifts the point of view. Now, yes, to be fair, we see quite a bit from Ernest's point of view. We see not quite as much from William Hale's point of view. Mostly Ernest Burkhart because he was married to Mollie. We have to be able to see what it is he was doing. She was accepting of him. She loved him, truly. They had children. And it isn't really until the end of the film, prior to this radio show that we see, which sensationalizing without really delivering a whole lot of insight, she confronts him, and this is after he's, of course, also sent to jail, or he's getting a sentence, and she says, listen, did you poison me? I just want to know. And he can't bring himself to say it. But she knows at that point. And in real life, of course, she also did. She eventually couldn't even talk about Ernest Burkhart anymore, didn't want to have anything to do with him anymore. There was a divorce, I believe. That was it. Now, but she couldn't really bring herself to believe it. And many of the Osage natives eventually couldn't even bring themselves to believe what Hale was doing. So these are two villains of the story where both actors, De Niro and DiCaprio, bring some level of humanism to them, because we see the charm in Hale. It's much more insidious. Robert De Niro has never really played a character this insidious before, where we think he's like a grandfatherly type, and he's a murderer. He's orchestrating this, and there's no end to where he will stop. I mean, at one point, he even thinks of killing Ernest Burkhart himself. Now, not him doing it, but somebody for him, obviously. It's kind of like the mob, in a sense, a mob mentality. But Mollie still informs this film, because I felt, while watching it, and with Robbie Robertson's amazing score, which is like a consistent drum, it has a sort of, it has this, it reaches certain peaks and valleys, kind of like the film itself, in a sense, but it's throbbing in the background, and it's the sounds of the natives, in a way. It is their soundtrack that informs the film. But even while watching the film, and even after I saw it, I always thought of Mollie Burkhart. She was just etched in my brain. Scorsese found a way to somehow make her feel like she informs the proceedings. She's the one that's really speaking for all the natives, in many ways. And there are a lot of native characters, including her sisters, but she's the one, like the black gold that rises from the ground. She rises as well. And she is being poisoned, I forgot to mention, by Ernest Burkhart. So she's taking the insulin, because she has diabetes, and many of these people had diabetes. Many of the women, and some of the men also. And they had to take insulin. He was spiking her insulin with poison, and it was a slow-moving poison. At which point, I think he even reaches a point where he can't even bring himself to keep doing this. Although you never get the impression he really stops until he's taken away from her and put in jail. Then she gets healthy again. He takes it himself at one point, which I thought was interesting. I don't remember that mentioned in the book, but it's a possibility. But she informs the entire film. Mollie Burkhart, Lily Gladstone informs the entire film. So even if it's not technically her point of view, she somehow, she's not an afterthought. She's a woman that we start to see the disease of the greed of these white men trying to take over. You just feel it. She's the soul of this film. And so she still emerges, in a sense, kind of like a phoenix. Like you just, it's implied. But I felt it. So I guess what I'm saying is I kind of feel like she is the film. She speaks for all the Osage natives. That's just my view of it, of course. But those were some of the criticisms of this reign of terror. And it's an important film. But I do feel she is the heart and soul of it. And again, no matter how you really tell the story, from whose perspective, you got to include the white villains of the film. You have to. So even if you may not follow them exclusively, I think it was important. I'm not saying that one point of view is richer than the other necessarily, but I think that for the length of this film, we feel like we're sort of it's all immersive in a sense. And I have to say, there's one scene in this picture where Mollie Burkhart, she is with her husband in their home, and there's a huge explosion. She's downstairs in the basement with her children. Ernest Burkhart knows what this explosion is. Her other sister, who lives nearby, was in the house that exploded, and she dies. And he comes back, and this is after there have been already several murders, and he just shakes her head at her. She knows what that means. And her cry of despair, I mean, that just went right through me. It was an amazing, amazing scene. It was just a reminder that what was happening to these people was just immoral. It was wrong. And it's still a story that, I spent like about 3 months reading that book before I saw the film. It's a story that still resonates. It's disturbing, and history that needs to be taught. But it won't be in Oklahoma, apparently, but it should be taught. It's a very important film. Anyway, those are my thoughts. Tell me, what are yours? Have you seen the film? Do you agree that Mollie Burkhart, at the very least, informs the film in many ways, even if it's not exclusively her point of view? And considering how the film starts with a ceremonial pipe burial with the Osage and ends with the Osage dance after this radio show that trivializes the Reign of Terror, do you feel that somehow those bookends really, make it clear that the Native American Osage is the center of the story in many ways, despite the tragedy? How else do you tell the story, really? So, of course, I don't know what anyone would think if it would have been interesting if an Osage native wrote this film and directed it. But that's not the film that we got. But maybe it will lead to other stories of this kind being told. I certainly hope so. A lot of it is tragic, but we can also see, positive stories about the Native Americans in history. I think there are some, and they should be told. So anyway, those are my thoughts. Lend me yours. Tell me what you think about Lily Gladstone. Have you seen her in any other films, or The Killers of the Flower Moon in general? Lend me your thoughts. Thank you to the subscribers that have subscribed to my channel. If you haven't subscribed, please do. And if you enjoy what you hear, and please click that notification bell for future uploads if you are already a subscriber. And this is Jerry Saturday at the Movies, signing off.